Hey, it's Rick Ellis. It is Friday, about 4 p.m. Central Time. And I wanted to post this real quick just to give you an update on the Dan Schneider libel suit against producers of Quiet on Set. There was a hearing today in LA Superior Court. And really, the entire case is sort of centering around a couple of different issues. One of which is, did people who watched the documentary have a decent chance of thinking that Dan Schneider committed some sort of sexual abuse against kids? And the other part of it is, if they did Dan Schneider present enough evidence to say, look, I did not do this, so this is definitely libel? And it was an interesting conversation in that, number one, the judge pointed out that Schneider had not ever said, look, I didn't do this. I did not commit any sort of sexual abuse. His lawyers did offer to have Schneider sign a written statement. The lawyers for the defense, who are basically the people who produced it, Sony TV, um, Warner Brothers Discovery, who owns Investigation Discovery, which is the network that Quiet on Set appeared on. The defense lawyers basically said, look, he had a chance to do this. He's never said anything this entire time since he filed the lawsuit back on May 1st. And he's just let surrogates talk, and it's too late for him to do it now. And the judge appeared to sort of agree with that, although he didn't issue a ruling one way or the other. As far as the idea of, was it possible for someone, just an average viewer, to watch the documentary and think that Schneider had committed sexual abuse, even though there were disclaimers in the series saying, look, we have no evidence that he's done that or had any knowledge of it. A lot of the discussion from the plaintiff, from Schneider's lawyers, was, look, here's all this evidence of comments on YouTube videos, comments on X tweets saying that, hey, look, he's done this. This is all the proof we've been waiting for. And the defense lawyers, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, actually, said, look, this is social media. We don't know who these people are. We don't know if they're being serious, or if they were just joking around. And the judge basically threw his hands up a little bit and said, yeah, this is a slippery slope, trying to figure out what someone's intentions are when we don't know who they are. We don't know if they're being legitimately outraged or if they're just trolling. But at the end of it, he issued a ruling and said, look, I'm tentatively throwing this case out. There's still a couple outstanding things. The judge has to decide about whether or not an average viewer, would think that Schneider had committed it. And really, a lot of this pivots on, can you watch just the trailer and think that Schneider had something to do with it? Do you need to watch one episode of the 4 episodes? Do you need to watch all of it to think that? And all that, both sides are going to come in and discuss that. There's a new hearing on November 8th, and the judge will rule after hearing those arguments, presumably. But short of that, short of Schneider's attorneys winning this argument, the libel lawsuit will be thrown out, and nothing. It'll be thrown out with what they say is prejudice, which basically means he can't come back and sue them again. So it looks like we're about 90% of the way there to Schneider losing this lawsuit, which is, I think, good news, because the producers of the documentary made a real big point of saying in the documentary, look, we don't believe that he committed any sort of sexual abuse, or at least we don't have any evidence to that. And honestly, having written about this story for a really long time, I didn't ever find any sort of evidence that he had committed any sort of sexual abuse. He was a terrible person, did some really horrible things to people who work for him, both actors and staff. He's a bit of an asshat, frankly. Very abusive person to work for. He did a lot of things wrong. I don't think, at least from what I can tell from working on this story for 4 or 5 years, that he sexual abused anyone. That being said, I don't think that most people would watch that and necessarily think that he had any sort of be sexual abuse behavior. I think one of the things from the documentary that is an interesting point, really, that a lot of people didn't pursue, it wasn't pursued so much in the documentary, is the things that allowed Schneider to be so abusive to his staff. the Nickelodeon executives who let that happen and who very much knew that it was happening. That same behavior, that same executive lack of oversight is what made the sexual abuse possible. It created this environment of not having responsibility, not having any sort of oversight, across the network, and that made things like the sexual abuse possible. It made the abuse against Drake Bell possible. So no, I don't think that Dan Schneider committed sexual abuse. I think that the factors that allowed him to be an abusive jerk for a decade also made these other things possible. So they are connected, but not really in the way that Schneider's arguing. I will keep updating you. If you're interested in more details about the story, about what happened in today's lawsuit, go to allyourscreens.com. I've got a full story there that I've updated with oral arguments from today's hearing and a bunch of backstory. I'll put a link in the show notes here, a direct link to this story, and I'll see you soon.